Welcome to a late spring edition of the Bobcast. Just three coaches left standing this week. We'll begin with baseball head coach Guy Robertson. Baseball 0-2 in the CAC tournament. The season ends for the Bobcats at 23-14, 9-9 in conference. Good for a fourth place finish. The Bobcats return to the playoffs after missing out last season and the first losing season in over 30 years last season. So back to the winning ways. Well, Coach, what did you make of the weekend at Salisbury? I know it was kind of a disappointing end to a nice run to close out the year.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect way to describe it. It's disappointing. We accomplished several goals throughout the year, but at the end we didn't accomplish, I guess the biggest ones we could have accomplished. Look, I said it before leading up, and it was about the pitching and the defense, and the pitching and the defense didn't exactly live up to the billing, and that was unfortunate. And it just was what it was. We didn't make a play at second base, and we couldn't, we just couldn't pitch our way out of some of the mistakes that were made behind some of our pitchers. And at the end of the day, it just wasn't good enough. And it's not one or two, individual plays. It's not one or two individual people. It's everything as a whole. And it was just disappointing, to come out and have played such good baseball, I thought, over the last couple weeks, and when our backs were against the wall over the last couple weeks, we kind of got our best effort. And maybe just the fight to get in was too much. Maybe the weather was too much over the long haul. I don't really know. We'll have plenty of time to reflect on it back over the summer and try to figure out the changes that need to be made. I guess at the end of the day, it wasn't good enough. I mean, York was a really good team this year swinging the bats, and they took advantage of every mistake that we made and the opportunities that they have, so tip your cap to them. And Salisbury was the best team in the league all year long and won a ton of games. So tough. It was just tough, and, I think at the end of the day, it was really, I guess for me, it was just unfulfilling to work as hard as we worked to get there again. So there's a lot to be said for that. But those two games in particular, it was just disappointing and unfulfilling. And, now we get back to trying to figure out how we take the next step. And we've been here before and trying to have, you win a championship and then you kind of go back a couple pegs and you try to rebuild it back up. And then you win a couple championships. And now we're kind of going back a couple pegs and we're building it back up. So a lot of positives from this season overall. But those two games in a nutshell were just disappointing.
Part of, I think, what makes it so disappointing is how high of a level this team could operate as. You look back at some of those high-profile national wins, beating number one Cortland, winning at Shenandoah, beating CNU after CNU had just a monster win streak, and barely anyone in the conference touched them the first half of the season. Were those games a glimpse of the potential that this team had when it was running on all cylinders, and what made it difficult this year to sustain that over longer periods of time?
Well, you just don't. You can't make excuses because clearly you were capable of doing things against some of the best teams in the country, and that was proof was in the pudding. But then we had some eggs laid against some much lesser caliber opponents. Shoot, you kind of saw the way the season went in 2 days time frame. We go out and we beat Shenandoah and, pretty handily, really. I mean, we handled them really well and then turn around the next day and lose to a Pitt Greensburg. Now, those guys have had a really good year based on their wins and losses or whatever, but they weren't the caliber of club that we were.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of saw, I guess, both halves of our season, the roller coaster that we were on all year long. And, I wish it wasn't a sign of things to come, but it kind of was. You could get great performances, very well pitched ball games, timely hitting, good defense one day, and turn around and not really be able to produce a whole lot offensively. Even though I think that game ended up being an extra innings in the score.
Mm-hmm.
But if I think back to that game, and really it was Pitt Greensburg, their third baseman made like 4 errors that allowed us to have probably half the 3/4 of the runs that we did score in that game. So it wasn't like we had a lot to do with the offensive production there. It was more the mistakes that they made that it gave us some things. So it was up and down all year, and You mentioned before we started talking here about the weather, and that was a real problem for us, and just wasn't able to get any consistency from the practice standpoint. Never being outside. I mean, we were constantly coming out of the gym trying to play games against good teams, and I think really, as much as anything, yeah, I mean, you lead to the physical part of it. But we were able to beat those good teams that you mentioned in and out of the gym
Yeah,
early in the
February
season
and March.
anyhow. So I think it's more about the mental wear and tear on the ball club, and just knowing that it's hard to get better that way, and you're not going to be able to get outside and cover some of the little things that you need to
Sure.
cover, and some of the mistakes that seem to continually be made. I mean, some things as simple as throwing the ball to the right base, based on where the base runners were and what type of hit was you were trying to defense, and those types of things, or where the cutoff men are supposed to be. Even just little things as the depth of the cutoff men versus the arms in the outfield and those types of things. So it's just stuff you can't work on, and it's
Hmm.
hard to sit there and talk about it if you can't show the guys, and they can't see like how it's supposed to be set up. It's tough, and that's just one or two little things right off the top of my head. I'll sit back and we'll go through it, and I'll fine tooth comb the whole season when here in June and July and working up to our fall season. But the other thing is that the injuries are a huge factor. I mean, we had Kyle Berger was an all-conference outfielder for us last year, and he had to turn around and catch a ton of games for us. Now he did a good job, but that just wasn't the way we were supposed that we were trying to set this up. I mean, at the beginning of the year, he was our fourth catcher, and at the end of the year, he ended up catching both ends of a doubleheader in the conference tournament. So, it just wasn't ideal there, and we had other situations, other injuries, and things that you just have to deal with, and guys in and out of the lineup throughout the course of the year. And I just think when you kind of have a vision in your head, and you kind of start to see that play out through the first month of the season, and then things just change drastically for one reason or another, and now the vision that you had and you're trying to see it play out, just it was more about trying to keep the pieces of the puzzle together. I mean, we took Mike Takovich, who didn't play at all as a position player last year, and ends up
Zip. Yeah.
being your starting shortstop for 17 of your 18 conference games, from third base to shortstop. I mean, I thought he did an admirable job, and really, I mean, it was really good. But that wasn't obviously what the plan was. And,
No.
just stuff like that. And Brady Adams, playing a primary role in the outfield after he would pitch, and just him swinging the bat. And he did a great job as well. Just those are just a couple examples of it. And again, you have those things throughout the course of the season where you have to make adjustments, you have to make changes. But it seems like too many times this year we were trying to draw stuff up in the dirt,
Yeah.
and just to try to keep the wheels on the cart enough to get where we wanted to go in order to give us a chance. And I think just with some of those difficulties and the hurdles, maybe in the end it just became a little bit too much to overcome. And you never want to say that, because you always feel like as a coach that you have an answer, you have a solution, that you're going to grind through it and you're going to figure out a way no matter what. But I guess as you look back at it, the reality of things are it was hard. And you're not trying to take anything away from the other teams, but I really believe that the group that we put together this year was capable more of 23 wins. And again, you only got to play 35 regular season games. You're trying to play 40, and it was a constant change in the schedule. And
Oh yeah.
there's just a million and one things that we could sit here and talk about, and we could go on and talk, in depth about. But at the end of the day, the record was what it was, and in the conference, it just wasn't good enough. And our conference ERA wasn't very good, and that's where it starts and that's where it ends. If you can't pitch it and you can't play defense, and our defensive statistics weren't very good in the league either. Yeah, there's several reasons for it, but at the end of the day, as a whole, this group wasn't good enough to get to a conference championship. And then we'll have to address some of those things and try to figure it out moving into the offseason, into the fall. And we'll work hard to address those issues and try to come to some sort of solution that next year's team can continue to progress positively.
That you took the next question right out of my mouth and right off my page. What do you want out of your players in terms of an off season in a baseball sense, and what needs do you need to address for next year, even if you haven't had a long time to kind of think about it?
Well, first and foremost, the middle infield's got to be way better. Our middle infield situation, our catching situation, it's got to improve. Just from the returner standpoint, that they have got to take more onus on their shoulders to get better. Working at their craft, understanding situations, understanding what it needs to be expected out of them, and not trying to do too much. So many times guys make mistakes where they try to do things that they're not capable of, and I think we just have to reel in a little bit more about what these guys actually can and can't do and help them understand that, and then work on the deficiencies and try to improve them. Our catching situation, Jason will be back, and he did a great job, especially leading up to the hand injury. And I just think after the hand injury, it just wasn't things weren't the same, and he had a hard time regaining that confidence. And and he'll have some time here over the summer to reflect. And I think that's another thing is that you got to be a little bit reflective. We talked about this the other day, and guys just need to try to be introspective and think about, hey, how can I improve, and then how can I help the ball club. We get too much out on an island sometimes being individuals and trying to figure out, hey, I need to hit 300 or I need to hit, this many home runs, drive this many runs. No, you need to be able to figure out the type of player that you are, and you need to be able to maximize those abilities within the team concepts that we have, and that's what we got to be able to do. So our middle infield play's got to be much improved, and our catching situation has got to improve. And then, of course, you got to get better on the mound. Brady will be back, and you look at him to be able to lead the pitching staff, but he's got to work on some things himself. I mean, his conference ERA was well over 6, and for a guy that's got the ability that he has, it's got to be better than that. I mean, there's just no excuses. You have the ball, you can dictate what's going on. You got to go out and be able to do a better job. And that starts with preparation. That starts with in between starts types things, and those are all things that have to get better. And again, that's just one example. I'm not trying to pick on him by any means, but it's a guy that you clearly proved. I mean, he beat the number one team in the country, and he handled them really well. And that was the last win that he had of the season.
He had a 15 strikeout game that turned out to be a loss against Mary Washington.
And again, there were definitely some games along the way. He left with the lead against St. Mary's in Game 1, and we gave it back on a ball in the dirt. And he pitched his tail off to get a win and get deep in that ball game and hold those guys at bay, because I think there was a point where there was runners on second and third and one out when we were down 2-0, and he held them right there, and then we were able to come back and ultimately win in extra innings. But I mean, he pitched better in stints that were better than the stats definitely show. But I know what he's capable of. He knows what he's capable of, and it's much greater than what we got this year. Our bullpen was outstanding. I thought that was a real strength of ours this year, to be able to bring some of the guys in that we did and be able to shut the door. We've got to get more of that, and we've got to get more than just 2 or 3 guys. It can't just be Livingston and DeLost next year.
Sure.
Obviously, Dan's gone, and he was phenomenal. He had an all-conference type
his best season.
Yeah, he saved the best for last and wasn't close. We got to be able to build on that and be able to we have to have 5 to 7 guys be able to come out of the bullpen and do what those 3 guys did if we're going to be successful next year. I mean, you're playing 27 innings of conference baseball. That's a lot to ask, so you're going to have depth in your bullpen. So those are just a few of the things, but it always is going to be pitching and defense. With metal bats, you're going to hit enough, and you're going to be able to produce enough offense most of the time, even though we got shut out against Salisbury, which is completely unacceptable. But you rely so much on the pitching, and the pitchers rely so much on the guys behind them, that's got to be a greater area of improvement. And those guys got to know it, and they got to come and embrace it, and we have to get after it more over the summer and into the fall. And those guys, the biggest thing about it, those guys got to be able to take that onus on themselves to get better in the summer, because we can't be there to coach them. We can't be there to instruct them. They got to go out and get better. And they got to come back in the fall with a chip on their shoulder, because to get to, I think what we was 23-5, I think was the run differential in the 2 conference games.
Mm-hmm.
That's sad. That's just a will thing, in my opinion. You just can't let that happen. And it's got to be a collective group of guys just saying, no, we are not going to be denied, and we're not going to let this happen. And we did that a little bit. I mean, we're down 4-0 to come back, and Civic hits a 3-run home run, and you're 4-3. But then it was, advance. So those guys extend. And there were some mistakes in there defensively that absolutely led to those problems. But, you just got to have a feeling inside you that I'm not going to be the one to let my teammates down. And I don't think that we had enough of those guys that were on the field this year that just had that collective grit about them. And that's something that, is going to have to be addressed from a personnel standpoint as well. So
I think something unique about Frostburg baseball, Last year, the first losing season in over 30 years. 23
Can
and
we
14.
stop talking about that?
Yeah, sorry.
That's all right.
23 and 14. That's a solid year, for a lot of programs. I have the feeling that you want more, and that's just the history of this program, dating back to
Well,
Bob Wells in the NAIA days.
look, I think the one part about 23 and 14 was a huge step in the right direction. You're looking at an 11-game swing from last year to this year. So that's a great step in the right direction. I don't want to take anything away from that. That is one of the big positives. We had 3 nationally ranked wins on our schedule that also included number 1 in the country and a team that's been to umpteen World Series in a row and regionals and all that. And look, there were a lot of bright spots, a lot of them. At the end of the day, this season is completely unfulfilling to me as someone who's been at the top of the mountain in this conference to have not been able to really get there and compete at the highest level. We were 1-5 against the top 3 teams in the league. That's not good enough. We were fine against the rest of the league, and that's why we finished 4th. But we were 1-5 against the best teams in the conference, and that's unacceptable. That's unacceptable. If you're going to be a championship caliber ball club, which I believe that we should be, regardless of the weather, regardless of the facility situation, regardless of the personnel, that I want to try and put each team together. And again, it's an individual year run. You want to try to build each team to be able to play your best baseball at the end of the year. And I thought at the end of the regular season, we were close to doing that.
Sure.
You started to see glimpses of those teams that beat those ranked teams earlier in the year. But we went 0-2 in the conference tournament. Completely unacceptable. And that's unfulfilling. And that's what you have to have. You got to sit on for 9 months. Now, we can also take that and you can sit there and you can, woe is me, and you can rest on your laurels that you did some good things, or you can use it as motivation that you just weren't good enough as a conference participant, that standard's got to be higher than that. And that will motivate me, and that will motivate the rest of us, or at least me, and then I'm going to motivate the rest of us to go forward and to try to improve upon, where we were. The whole goal from last year to this year, look, we had to get back in the conference mix. Last year was a joke. It was completely unacceptable. And look, you saw 11-game improvement, and 9 games from wins to losses, better in the win column. So that's a huge plus, and I'm happy and I'm proud of that. But to be 0-2 in the conference tournament, and really after the first 3 or 4 innings of the 18 that we played, be a non-factor. Unacceptable, completely unacceptable.
Well, you have conference titles in 11, 15. There are 4-year cycles between each one. Next year is 2019, and the journey begins now, doesn't it?
Well, there was more than that. I mean, you win a regular season in 2010, you get to the championship game of the tournament in the AMCC and don't get over the hump there. We finished second in 2011 and then win the tournament and get to the regionals for the first time. And then you lost a ton of seniors. And if you look back, you lost a huge amount of innings pitched and a huge amount of wins on the mound from in 2011 to 2012. You take a step back, but that's completely understandable. And then you start building, through there, and then you get 2015, and then you turn around and you win a regular season again in 2016, and you get the at-large bid because you don't win the tournament championship in 2016. So there's a lot more to it than, just 11 and 15. I'm proud of all, everything that went on from, the time I got here to now. There's a lot of peaks and a lot of valleys, but that's, I think, baseball at Frostburg State University.
Yeah.
You're going to have those. You don't have the ability, I think, every year to be a conference champion.
Sure.
But I think that's the case anywhere. You want to put yourself in a position to try and compete at the highest level of the conference each year, regardless of your personnel, regardless of the circumstance. And I think that's what was disappointing about this year. Last year, in and of itself, was just awful. So to get back and achieve some things, some goals that we had, were exciting. We're a lot of steps in the right direction. But, at the end of the day, we were 23 and 14, and we finished 4th in the conference. There were a lot of good things in that 23, but there were a lot of bad things in the 14. So we'll take those things and we'll try to improve upon the 23 and minimize
Sure.
the 14, and try to create a bigger gap between the wins and the losses next year. But the 9-9 in the conference has got to be the focus on improving. I mean, you're going to have more conference games next year. I guess we're going to have 21
Three
conference
game
games,
series
three game
against
sets
everyone?
next year with Marymount and Wesley being gone. Now we moved to 3 game sets. That's 27 innings of baseball. Um, three 9 inning games. Go figure how we're going to manipulate that when we get bad weather. But I guess we'll just cross that bridge when we come to it. But at the end of the day, a lot of bright spots, some steps in the right direction, but not enough steps in the right direction. But we'll continue to work at it, and we'll continue to try to get better, and look back here and figure out where we went wrong and try to improve upon those things. And we'll move into 2019 as best we know how, and continue to try to put ourselves in a position to compete for a championship. And at the end of the day, regardless of the circumstances, I like to think that we've set a different, higher standard around here over the last 5 to 7 years about what the expectation level is and what we are capable of and where the ceiling's at. And we want to try to continue to work towards getting to that ceiling and then pushing that ceiling up a little bit further.
On to 2019. Coach, thank you so much for joining me all season long.
It's been my pleasure. This has been a fun, new thing that we've gotten to do this year, and
Yeah.
look forward to doing it again next year, and hopefully under continued positive circumstances.
Absolutely. On the Bobcast, we have men's and women's track and field head coach Dale Louie, and track and field, the women finishing 6th at the CAC Championships, the men finishing 7th at CACs down in Salisbury. Coach, how was the weather and how were the results for your squads?
Weather was pretty good. First day was a little on the warm side, and the wind was reflected in the sprint times as
Sure.
well as some of the other times and things. So, but that's something you live with. You do by rule have the ability to turn around the direction that you do your jumps and your sprints, and some places do it, some don't. They didn't do it. Second day was there were periods of time there where it was quite calm, and then there were times where the wind picked up, but it was probably a better day than the first day.
Results overall, men's side, women's side, what did you like?
Well, I mean, I honestly think that our men, hung in there and scored some points that maybe, we knew were, questionable. Braxton Clark, for example, placing in the 10K. I mean, the guy's never run a 10K before, so. And the conference is very, very good in track and field, and at the national level and stuff, and it doesn't matter quite what event you look at, it's pretty strong, and distance is very strong. So, that was very significant, and we. Robbie Romano, he's placed in the mile, he's placed in the 1500. So placing was not out of what we expected and hoped for.
Sure.
But again, with the weather and stuff, sometimes you just don't know how people react to the wind, or more specifically in their case the heat and stuff. Especially since we're not training in that environment. So it's a big change. So not only did he place, but he ran a very good time. And placed very well for us there. Mike Harley in the hammer throw, I believe, hit a PR there and took a nice place for us there. John Kearns, had a PR there in a shot and picked some points up there. James Nail was thrown with a bad arm, and he and Brad Forrester both placed for us. Now James, placed higher last year, but considering his arm issues, did a very nice job, and Brad hit a PR there in the javelin there. So we had a lot of good things there, on the men's side. We certainly would have liked to have scored more points. As we talked before we came on air here, we lost Shamar Nelson on his very first run down the runway, and that's a guy that we could have almost banked on points in the long jump. We probably would have certainly run faster and moved up in the point scoring for the 4x1, but injuries happen, and unfortunately we lost points there. There's no doubt about that.
But men, consistent with all your long depth in your distance group, depth in your throwers, and Shamar's a guy who's chasing in long jump 7 meters, hoping to go to nationals. We hope to see him back for ECACs. So for the men, more or less, meeting our expectations.
Yeah, one other guy, I just thought of it, really ran an exceptional leg on a 4x4 was Kevin McCarthy. He really booked it around. And did what we felt that he's capable of doing, and I think he knows he's capable of doing it. But to date, he hadn't really done that, and he had a really pretty good conference meeting. And at the end, his very last event, that 4x4, ran a really, really good leg for us there.
And we've been talking all spring with the outdoor track meets. You're kind of limited in the number of nice days or chances to put up fast times. Can you speak to, say, the women's side and how some of your women and sprinters especially were able to cash in on a nice day and put up some good times?
Yeah, no doubt about that. Kayla had a PR in the 100 meters there, which certainly helps in her chase to try to get to nationals again. Her 200 time was pretty close to a PR. That particular race was definitely affected both in the trials and in the finals by wind. She anchored the 4x1 there, and they ran their best time of the year. And moved them up in the NCAA rankings there. The 4x4 was quite a race. Disappointed in that we didn't win since we had won indoors, but there's good competition there, and we have been in particular butting heads with Wesley all year long with those relays and stuff, and I know they don't like to lose to us, and we don't like to lose to them, but I think it's a really good, healthy competition that pushes, both teams. So we ran a season best there, has pushed us up a little bit in the standings. Probably not what we really wanted, but quite honestly, I was really impressed with, the women in that relay, because it's the end of a 2-day meet. And a bunch of those women have run a number of events. Kayla, for example, has got trials and finals in the 100 and the 200 and a 4x1 and coming back in the 4x4, and Destiny 200 trials and a 400 and 2 relays. Kayleen did 5 events, ran a heck of a 400-meter hurdle for us, and just barely lost out winning that thing, which we thought she had a real shot at winning that, and she proved us correct there. You could tell as they grabbed those batons and stuff that there was some lactic acid build up there and stuff. But what I'm hoping that group comes away with is that hey, we ran this kind of time, we ran these kind of splits when we were dead tired. We can do that, and we get somewhere else where we're maybe doing a little less of a load, maybe better things will happen. Another person who did exceptionally well for us was Sidani Brown. I mean, that girl has
another PR, second straight week.
Another big PR. She finished 9th. I mean, she ran in a slower heat, ended up, as she did at Shippensburg, running almost the whole race by herself, or running large sections by herself, and then just sticking to it and beating a girl out at the coming down the straightaway then. And just really amazing improvement. Not something that we don't think she's been capable of, but it's her turn now to start believing, and she's showing that.
Yeah, back-to-back weeks she's put up career best times. I want to touch on those relay teams, and now looking ahead on the women's side, they've put up nationally competitive times. There's still a couple weeks. You're not in, and they take fewer relay teams. For you as a coach now, What is the path that you're looking to guide them along to get to nationals? I know talking to Caleb before the meet, that is certainly a goal of hers to have the relay team, whether at nationals. What is kind of the plan you're looking to put together to achieve that goal?
Well, we certainly have to practice in the 4x1 in particular with our handoffs because there's always room for improvement, and I think we have a great deal of room for improvement in that area there. And you if you can get really just one really slick handoff and two that the baton keeps moving, we're capable of pushing close to 47 flat. Maybe faster. It all comes together, and that will give us a very good shot at getting in. The 4x4, we no matter what we do at ECACs in terms of lineup, we will probably have hopefully a little fresher crew when we go into that 4x4. The schedule is set up also so that we will be probably fresher running that. So that will hopefully play in our hands a little bit. Hopefully we'll have the competition to push us. Hopefully we do our job, in that regard as well. We have some decisions to make, and we'll talk to the women, just what do they want to go after individually, and what do we want to go after relay-wise, and we'll listen to what their thoughts are.
Sure.
Sometimes you sit out and you don't do a whole lot at a meet, and then you try to, throw all your eggs in one basket, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, because sometimes I think some people need to get into the flow of the meet, and so that's something we'll need to consider as well.
That's very interesting. Coming up, we've got Allegheny next week, and then ECACs, which is kind of a midweek meet. ECACs, when you look at indoor, Frostburg arguably had more success and faster times at ECACs. Are you looking for a similar result, and why is that, you think, that indoor track was able to achieve more at indoor ECACs and potentially outdoor track is looking to do the same?
Well, one of the things, quite frankly, is that indoors we had one less meet than we normally have because of really quirks in the schedule this year. Our conference has its championship earlier than most other conferences, and it kind of puts us in a spot there where other people's schedules don't match ours. So we had in a sense, ECACs was conference week, in terms of where we were at with practicing and particular competition. We face the same thing here outdoors. We most of our people did not compete because of the snow out that we had.
Spring break week, yeah.
Or cold weather, event that we had here. Clearly, until the end here, weather hasn't been really conducive. The few people that were able to get to Mary Washington, literally had snow the second day. So we're behind training wise, we're behind competition wise, and there's not a whole lot you can do about it other than just keep trying to do your best. We are concerned about finding a place to practice for our 4x1s. We are so close to making it, and we're gonna need to try to find some opportunities there to somehow or other get that practice in, because that's essential. We have a challenge there, and we'll do some tuning up. If we don't send people to Allegheny, this becomes a real nice week of trying to get some good work in, some quality stuff, and yet we still have time to back off and hopefully, have them relatively fresh. And then we got to cross our fingers and hope the weather cooperates at ECACs.
Yeah, and Coach, I'll tell you what, some nice results here from CACs, the men's side, those distance guys, the throwers, the women's side, the sprinters do it again. We're looking forward to it, ECACs in 2 weeks. Looking forward to that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
So we're looking at men's lacrosse in 3, 2, 1. Back on the Bobcast, I'm here with men's lacrosse head coach Tommy Pierce. Men's lax ending its season at York on Tuesday night in the CAC semifinals, a 16-8 loss, finishing the year out at 10-9 overall. 6 of 9 losses this season were to ranked opponents. And coach, on the surface level, it's a similar overall record compared to last season, but an extra win, a home playoff game, a semifinal appearance. Where can you point to the progress that this team and this program made in the 2018 season?
Yeah, I guess we kind of put ourselves back at the end of the year where we were a couple of years ago. Last year was the 2 years, not this year, the year before was the first time in a while that we hadn't made it to the conference semifinals. And, in looking at the way the brackets went yesterday, the 3 teams ahead of us made the NCAA tournament. So, that's what our goal has been for several years now. We haven't been able to achieve it, but we finished just outside of it in our conference. You mentioned obviously a lot of losses to ranked teams, and when you look at the regional rankings that came out, we had a couple 1-goal losses to teams that weren't in the regional rankings. So we're sitting just outside the regional rankings, and I think. We're not far outside of it. We haven't been able to do exactly what it takes to put ourselves right in the mix in a while, and so we're gonna have a meeting tonight to wrap up the season with the guys, and it's back to the drawing board, trying to figure it out and do what we can to make next year the year. Obviously there's a little bit of a sense of disappointment when you don't achieve your goals, because if there wasn't, you probably didn't care about your goals enough to set them right there. So. We'll get back to the drawing board here once we've given the guys nearly a week here to kind of let it soak in and get healthy, and we'll be getting back to work here shortly.
Yeah, speaking of your goals, it was very clear that coming into the year, the goal for this program is to get into the conference tournament. The schedule reflected that. 5 ranked teams through the season, another ranked team in the conference semifinals. So you got a chance to see a bunch of teams that made the tournament. Can you point to the margin and how large is that margin, and what areas do you see the margin between this program and, say, some of the teams that you faced this season, and how do you close that gap, and do you continue to have this kind of schedule to prepare yourself to get into the NCAA tournament?
Oh, for sure. I tell the guys all the time it's an honor to be able to play the schedule that we play, and the guys that came before them in starting the lacrosse program here at Frostburg, they didn't have the luxury. They didn't have the privilege to be able to play the teams they play, but they worked hard for us to be able to have it. So we certainly don't want to change that. What we'd like to do is maybe do a little bit better within it, obviously. And I think that, obviously you can look at statistics and see where you come up a little bit short. I think, there are some games against some of those top opponents where we weren't really close. You know what I mean? And obviously you have to accept that and look at it critically and see what you need to do. I think, there are a couple areas that we didn't do as well as we have in the past. And a lot of that is not really our guys so much as facing some pretty tough face-off guys.
Sure.
Eric Geiser was a couple years ago was 70-some%, and Billy Lark was great. And coming into the season, Sam Natvig missed the year with his back injury, and I think Matty Pagliaro did a great job stepping up as a freshman, but he's facing off against some All-Americans in and out of conference, and really held his own, and I think that's promising for the future. I'm a little bit. We spent a ton of time on it. And I'm still a little bit, trying to kind of figure out why we struggled a little bit in the clearing game this year. I think that really came back to bite us. We had to defend. Multiple times repeatedly because we weren't able to get it out of our end, and when you're failing some clears and scrapping at the face off, but maybe not being as successful as you've been in years past, you're losing the possession battle. I think statistically we were a pretty good shooting team, but I would say that we didn't necessarily generate enough shots to make our shot percentage result in more shots. A little bit of that was turnovers, and I think that one of the big things when we're playing some of these better teams out there. They've got some better stick skills than we do. You know what I mean? So one of the things I'm really going to get on our guys about this summer is to make sure they're spending the time on the wall. They're dumping a bucket of balls and getting some shots in. I think that being able to handle the ball the way that some of these top teams that we've played this year are able to is going to be huge for us moving forward.
And those are things we've heard from you all season long. I want to point to several points where this team could have really given up, packed it in, started 2-4, a really poor loss to McDaniel, started conference play 0-2 in winnable games to CNU and Mary Washington. How were the players on your team able to react to those lows throughout those points in the season and come back and really turn this into a year where you go on that big 5-game win streak and return to the CAC semifinals? How did they respond?
Right. Well, I mean, I think it's easy to just to point out to them that that there's opportunities throughout the course of the year. You know what I mean? Obviously, when you play your non-conference schedule, you hope you do great to give yourself. I mean, there's 2 teams that got Pool C bids within our conference, so we're in a conference that in this particular year was a 3-team.
It's been at least a
league.
2-bid lead for the last 9 years.
For sure, yeah, it's been 3 a couple times, and I think we've been just outside of it a couple times. We narrow lost to Mary Washington in 3-4 years ago. That might have put us in there, and then we had a year where we were 16-3, but we were still working on getting our non-conference schedule to where it is now. Mm-hmm. So actually, our SOS, the year that we were 16-3 with 2 losses to Salisbury, our strength of schedule kept us out of consideration. So obviously that's something we had to get guys to play us. And now that we're there, it's harder to go 16-3 when you're playing the schedule that we're playing. So it's all relative, but. Yeah, it's just easy to kind of say along the way that, it's okay. As long as we're getting better, then we're going to get our conference slate next. And, that's going to be important for us to determine whether or not we get a home game or whether we're going on the road. And then, everything's still on the table if we're able to make it in that conference tournament. So just, kind of not, obviously assessing each game and learning from it and doing what you can to improve throughout the season. But just kind of telling the guys, hey, guys, nothing's over. There's no – if you pack it in now, you're wasting some opportunities that still lie ahead of us.
Yeah, and some big wins for your team. Southern Virginia twice. Those stand out as close wins for you. I want to touch on a couple seniors. Adam Gross, Bradley Jones both end up as all-conference guys, and this is a conference dominated on those teams by York guys, Salisbury guys, CNU guys. Can you speak to the recognition that they got in such a competitive conference and the seasons that they had and the impact they've had on your team and program?
Sure. And both those guys all conference for 2 years in a row now.
Yep, Gross 3 years now.
3 for Gross, sorry. Yeah. Adams, I think that's just he's a big guy and he's a tough matchup. So I think going into every game, everybody's kind of a little bit worried about defending Adam Gross. I think he uses his size well. Especially, each of the last year he was nursing a foot injury, and this year his ankle. He was dragging his ankle around at the end of the year. So it's kind of a bummer that he was never able to finish each of his last 2 seasons completely healthy. But he's played through those injuries and gave everything for the team. One of the things I think about Adam is that he does really have good vision. Sometimes I'd like to use a little bit of discretion on maybe who's open and who's not open, but he gets a lot of assists. So if he's not drawing slides and shooting, then he can draw slides and see open people. So I think he's a lot of guys on our team statistically benefit from him finding him. Paul Rupert on Man Up especially.
Sure.
And then Bradley, he's pretty dedicated to the game. He really wants to know the X's and O's and be a leader defensively. I remember he actually wears number 50 because Paul Newman wore number 50, and Paul Newman was kind of the guy that was the vocal leader of our defense. And he kind of wanted to. We graduated some. Zach Burkhart and Paul Newman in the same year, and those guys kind of led the defense. And Bradley, really wanted to kind of embrace that role. And he's done a great job. I think he's had some different guys around him each of the last couple of years, and from playing with Tom Kramer to having a freshman and sophomore now in there with Jack Marks. He's been a consistent figure down there defensively for us, and a good defender too. Obviously, you don't get all conference just because you're good at organizing the defense. You got to play pretty well too. So he's been great for us.
Jones starting every game over the last 3 seasons defensively for you guys. Do you have a favorite moment, and how will you remember this team?
I was actually at the end of the year. I've been saying to my assistant coaches that I don't know in my time here at Frostburg that we've had a group of guys that when they come to practice, they know what they have to get done at practice that day, but they really have fun doing it. You know what I mean? I kind of got to the point in the year where they were giving each other a hard time, or if somebody made a play on offense or defense, they were kind of chirping at each other and laughing at each other, but they were working really hard. And I think that I kind of told my assistant coaches, I was like, I kind of want to put this in a bottle and capture this, because I've never really had a team that's working so hard and having so much fun at the same time at the end of the season. And I really thought that going into the end of the year, maybe we had something special that could make us kind of have a little bit of a run here late.
Sure.
But I think that this particular group of guys, I just at the end of the year, I don't know if I've had as much fun going to practice as I did at the end of the season. So I think that's what I'm going to take away from this year the most. Obviously, I think I would like to have had a couple, one or two more signature wins that might have been my better memories this year. But we weren't able to prevail on any of those games versus ranked opponents this year, unfortunately. So like I said, that's what we'll be paying attention to moving forward here, obviously.
Put it on the list for next year. Final question here. How important is the off-season for a men's lacrosse team, and what do you hope that your players can accomplish in that time?
It's enormous, and that's one of the things where, you hope that the culture of your program takes over. You know what I mean? It's kind of, when you talk about integrity, it's what guys do when, the coach isn't watching, and I think that we're going to kind of ask some guys to be pretty honest with us here in their exit interviews about, how much they're really working hard over the summer. I think we have a great strength program here that the guys really buy into at Frostburg, but I wonder how much some of our guys, after they get done lifting, how much of them go for a run, or how much of them get on the speed ladder, how much of them are shooting. And I think obviously that there are guys that are, but I don't know that if everybody's doing it, and I think that's one of those things where you look at, like when we were playing York, their offense was just singing the ball around, and I was like, I want to I want us to move the ball around a little bit better. I want us to, be able to get it from the front side to the back side without it dying in sticks, or, dropping it and having to bend over and pick it up. And I think that, when you're looking at kind of where we are, we've been regionally ranked, we've been nationally ranked, but we haven't made it to the NCAA tournament. You really need to split hairs over the tiniest little things, because I think those are the things that add up to, hopefully getting us, where we're setting our goals for us to be, but we're continually coming up short. So, I think everybody's got to kind of look deep and be honest with themselves and ask themselves if they're doing everything they're supposed to be doing for us to get there, or whether they're talking about getting there, but not really doing, when all things are said and done, more things are said than done. Mm-hmm. This is what I took from my mentor in coaching and my coach as a player more than anything. And we want to be guys that do what we say, not say what we do a little bit. So that's going to be our message going into the summer, and hopefully guys embrace it.
The beauty is I know you'll have a difficult schedule, and you'll prove it out on the field once again next year. Tommy Pierce, thank you for joining us all season long.
Thank you.